Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Sean here once again with another video. It's the third time I tried recording this one. I didn't realize my phone was running out of memory. It cut me off a few times, so this is now the third time I'm starting this video. We're moving on now. We've looked at in the last few videos where we're at. We've looked at some of the 3D systems. We've shown how they're collapsing, and we've also shown how really most of them weren't really built for our benefit anyway. Now we're going to be moving on into where we're going. And we're going to address, right starting from the beginning, what is Ascension? What are we talking about when we're talking about Ascension? What is this fifth dimension? What is this whole thing all about? So Ascension, put very simply, is the process of raising our frequency, our body, mind, and our spirit sufficiently to enter into a higher state of consciousness, which will allow us to perceive a higher timeline, a better world. Essentially, as we raise our consciousness, so too do we raise the experience of what we live in our everyday lives. So it's really going from the third dimension into the fifth dimension. We could also call it enlightenment, which enlightenment, just looking at the word, includes lightenment or lightening, and we are really lightening ourselves. We are raising our frequency. We could also call it a paradigm shift. So instead of trying to change the current paradigm, it's a complete shift in focus, in our way of thinking. It's a complete shift in paradigm altogether. We are in the process of ascending. We are leaving behind the density of the third dimension, which is built in the notion of separation and fear, and we are moving into the idea of unconditional love and unity consciousness. So as Nikola Tesla, a wise man, once told us many years ago, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And essentially we're embracing that concept and realizing that the entire physical world that we see, as quantum physics and even physics prior to that has shown us, isn't as solid as it appears, and in fact everything is in a constant state of vibration. If we look closely at the nature of matter itself, which includes our cells, which is built up of atoms. We take a close look at atoms, we see that they are almost entirely, in fact they are 99.99999% empty space. What we experience through our five senses, the reality and the world and the life that we live, which we experience through our five senses, is entirely an interpretation in our brains. Quantum physics has shown us, if you're not familiar with it, check out what's called the double slit experiment, but it's shown us very, very, very clearly that the nature of reality and how reality and matter itself responds changes depending on whether there is or is not an observer to observe it. And in fact, the nature of reality itself changes depending on the state and the beliefs and the frequency of the observer itself. So when we change, as we raise our frequency, when we actually change our perception, so does our world and our reality change to reflect that. We've come to realize that in fact reality itself is really just a reflection of our state of consciousness. Time, as we've come to realize through, again, experiments in quantum physics, time itself, linear time as we perceive it in the third dimension, is in fact an illusion. And in fact, all time, past, present, and future, no matter how far back or forward we may go, exists simultaneously in this present moment, which is, of course, based in the way we've been taught and raised and thought our entire lives, a hard concept to wrap your mind around, but it is pretty empowering when you accept that. We've also come to realize, of course, that fear itself, which is the basis of our third dimensional reality, it is really the food almost of the 3D matrix, is also an illusion. And we can look at fear as an acronym, which would say false evidence appearing real. And in fact, as we get deeper into the nature of reality through experiments, especially in recent years, we've come to realize that in fact our entire reality as we perceive it, although it appears to be solid, is in fact an illusion and an interpretation in our brains. So Ascension is really to recognize this, to recognize our multidimensionality, to recognize the multidimensional nature of our universe, and to leave behind the illusion of separation and fear. What we're doing in the process of ascending is we're leaving behind, again, the illusion of separation, the illusion of linear time, the illusion of fear, and embracing unity consciousness, unconditional love, and the timeless, ever-present moment of now, ever now, if you want to call it. So we could look at it as, especially as we start to raise our vibration, we could really start to see that the third dimension, we could almost call it a hell or a hellish experience. The fifth dimension would be almost a heaven on earth. It's a completely different reality, but it is existing at the same time and in the same place as our three-dimensional world that we currently occupy. What we've come to realize, especially again through quantum physics, is that because of the multidimensional reality, nature of our reality, all moments exist at the present time. There are different timelines which are all coexisting, and we've come to realize that instead of trying to change the world itself does not change. The three-dimensional timelines and the three-dimensional world will remain as they are, but what we're doing is actually changing ourselves sufficiently in order to raise ourselves up and start existing in another higher timeline of a higher frequency. And that's why in the last few videos we've talked about, and you may be wondering why I say stop paying attention to the news, stop paying attention to what the government's doing. It's because we don't in fact change our reality. The reality as it appears will continue to be the reality as it appears. What we do is we increase our own frequency, and the reality that we perceive changes. So instead of worrying about the outside world, we begin to worry about the inside world. We raise our own frequency individually, and the world that we perceive changes. I heard a story by Wayne Dyer, which was kind of funny, but it made a lot of sense, especially in terms of this whole ascension process. And it was basically a story of a person who had their car keys in their hand. Suddenly the power went out, it was complete darkness, and they had dropped their car keys on the floor. So instead of, they realized it's too dark to see anything in here anyway, I'm not going to start groping around in the dark. They looked outside and they saw a street lamp. So they said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go outside and I'm going to look for my car keys out there. At least there's light out there. And someone came along and said, what are you doing here looking around on the ground? He's like, I dropped my car keys. The guy started trying to help him, trying to find his car keys. And after about 15 or 20 minutes, he said, well, where did you drop them anyway? Of course, the guy said, I dropped them in my house. He said, you mean to tell me we've been standing out here looking for your car keys outside here for the last 20 minutes and you dropped them in your house? Why would you be looking for them out here? And he said, well, because it's too dark inside. I know I'm not going to be able to find them inside. And although that seems like a funny story, based on the way we've been raised in our third dimension, it seems like when we have problems, issues, fears, concerns, we seem to always be reaching outside of ourselves for solutions, when in reality, all of our solutions, everything we need in all our lives for our own fulfillment and our own ascension lies within each and every one of us. In fact, each and every one of us is a fractal or a small piece of the whole. We are, in fact, an entire universe, each and every one of us unto ourselves, and everything that we need for our own fulfillment, our own happiness, and our ascension lies within each and every one of us. So ascension starts with really recognizing that, recognizing the multidimensional nature of our reality, to stop looking outside of ourselves, to stop trying to fix the world through actions outside of ourselves, and instead turn our focus inward, raise our own frequency, our own vibration, and in that way we actually change the world. We don't change the world, but we do change the world that we live in. It's like trying to change a mirror and make the mirror smile by trying to fix the mirror instead of smiling ourselves. So ascension is really recognizing that in order to make the mirror smile, the only way to do that is to smile yourself. It's to stop really paying attention to these 3D matrices, these 3D systems, the 3D world itself. Focus on our own vibration, increase our own vibration, and in doing so we raise our consciousness to such a point that the reality that we experience changes as well. So part of the reason I feel the urgency to get this information out there now is the fact that it's not just us humans that are ascending, but in fact the Earth herself is ascending. We've been noticing, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Schumann Residence, but the Schumann Residence is essentially the frequency emitted by the planet, which was stable for hundreds of years as long as we've been measuring it. But in the last several years, especially since 2012, the Schumann resonance of the Earth has been increasing dramatically, the earth herself is ascending, and as the vibration of the earth increases, as the frequency of the earth increases, it'll become more and more painful and more difficult to exist within a three-dimensional construct. So for everybody that hasn't really started looking at ascension for themselves, who are still trying to fix the mirror or still trying to look for their keys outside, it will become more and more painful and more difficult. And in fact, life itself in the third dimension is going to become harder and harder as the frequency of the earth increases. Living in a lower frequency will become more and more painful, and there will come a time in the not too distant future where the third dimension, the three-dimensional timelines, will actually collapse. So I feel that prior to that, as much as I can do to get the word out to people, especially people that haven't started really looking at these concepts yet, to start actually focusing on increasing your vibration, to focus on yourself instead of the outside world. Hopefully I can save a lot of people a lot of pain, and hopefully we can bring as many people along onto ascended and higher timelines as we possibly can. So this is the first video in the series. I'm not going to get into now how we start ascending, although of course just in basically describing it, a lot of the information's in there. But this is really just in a nutshell and as quickly and as concisely as I can describe it. What is ascension? What are we talking about? What we're going to do now is come back in the next video and we'll start working on how do we begin the process of ascension. How do we, each one of us, raise our frequency, and we'll start looking at some of the nuts and bolts of what we can each do individually in our own lives to increase our own frequency. So that concludes this video, and again, I love you, and I'll see you in the next video.